They were all smiling when I signed it. Not nervous smiles, not forced ones. The kind of smiles people have when they already know they've won. My brother leaned back in his chair like he was watching a movie he'd already seen before. My aunt kept nodding, like this was just another necessary step. And my father, he didn't even look at me. He just said it. Sign it. It's the only way to fix this. Fix this. That word almost made me laugh. Because by that point, I already knew there was nothing to fix, only something to finish. I picked up the pen, paused for just a second, and looked around the room one last time. Every single one of them thought I was about to lose everything. They didn't realize I was giving it to them. My name is Ayan. And about 3 months before that moment, my life looked nothing like this. I wasn't rich in the flashy Instagram way. No sports cars, no luxury vacations every other week. But I had something better control. I ran a mid-sized logistics company, built it from nothing. Started with one rented van and a second-hand laptop that overheated every hour. Within 7 years, I had contracts with 3 major distributors and a steady cash flow that made life comfortable. Not perfect, but stable. And stability was everything to me. Because growing up, we never had it. My father was the kind of man who believed money came in waves, you just had to wait for your turn. The problem was, his turn never came. Every opportunity turned into a risk. Every risk turned into debt. And every debt became someone else's problem. Usually mine. But I didn't complain. Not really. Because somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that if I just worked hard enough, I could pull all of us out of that cycle. And for a while, I thought I did. It started small. It always does. My father came to me one evening, sitting down across from me like it was just another casual conversation. I need a little help, he said. Not unusual. How much, I asked. He hesitated. That should have been my first warning. Just temporary, a short-term investment, 50,000. 50, not 5, not 10, 50,000. I remember leaning back in my chair, studying his face. He wasn't nervous. If anything, he looked confident. Too confident. What's it for, I asked. A property deal, good return, guaranteed. Guaranteed. That word again. I should have walked away right there. But he was my father. So instead, I sighed, opened my laptop, and transferred the money. Don't make me regret this, I told him. He smiled. You won't. I regretted it 2 weeks later. The deal fell through. That's what he said. Market conditions, bad timing, someone backed out. Excuses. But I didn't push too hard. Mistakes happen, right? Then my brother showed up. Different tone, different energy, same request. I've got an opportunity, he said, pacing around my office like he already owned it. High return, low risk. I almost laughed. Did Dad send you? I asked. He smirked. No, but I guess he told you about his thing? Yeah, his thing cost me 50,000. This isn't like that, he said quickly. This is different. Of course it was. It always is. How much? I asked, already knowing I was going to hate the answer. 80. I stared at him. 80,000? It's temporary, he added quickly. Short term. I'll pay you back with profit. Profit. Another word people love using when they don't actually have any. No, I said. Simple, clear, final. For a second, his expression changed. The confidence cracked just a little. Then he leaned in closer. Come on, Ayan. We're family. There it was. Not logic, not a plan. Just guilt. And somehow, it worked. By the end of that month, I was down 130,000. And that's when things started to feel off. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they acted. Too calm, too coordinated. My father and brother, who usually argued about everything, suddenly agreed on everything. My aunt started calling me more often, checking in, asking subtle questions about my business. How are things going? Still stable? No issues with cash flow? At first, I thought it was concern. Then I started paying attention. The first real crack came on a random Tuesday night. I wasn't supposed to be home. That's the only reason I heard it. I walked in quietly, dropped my keys on the table, and just as I was about to head upstairs, I heard voices coming from the living room. My father, my brother, and my aunt, He won't suspect anything, my brother was saying. My hand froze on the staircase railing. He's already stressed, my aunt added. Just push a little more. Push? Push what? Then my father spoke. We need him to sign before he figures it out. Sign what? My chest tightened. I took a step closer. Slow. Careful. What if he says no? My brother asked. He won't, my father replied immediately. He's predictable. He always tries to fix things. Fix things. That word again. I felt something shift in my stomach. Not panic, not fear. Something colder. What about the documents? My aunt asked. They're ready, my father said. We just need the right moment. Documents. Signatures. Pressure. It all started connecting. And suddenly, those loans didn't feel like random mistakes anymore. They felt like setup. I didn't walk in. I didn't confront them. I didn't even make a sound. I just stood there for a few seconds, letting everything sink in. Then I quietly turned around, walked out the door, and sat in my car. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I felt focused, because now I knew this wasn't about helping them. This wasn't about bad investments. This was planned, carefully, slowly, and I was right in the middle of it. The next morning, I acted normal. Went to work, answered emails, took calls, but inside, everything had changed. I started digging, not aggressively, not obviously, just small things. I reviewed my father's property deal. It didn't exist. The company he mentioned, fake, registered 2 months ago under a different name. My brother's opportunity, same pattern. Shell accounts, no real assets. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd redirected it. Somewhere else. Somewhere intentional. And that's when I realized something that made my jaw tighten. They weren't just trying to take what I had. They were trying to make me weak first. Drain me. Destabilize me. So, when the real move came, I wouldn't be able to fight back. A week later, the real move arrived. My father called a family meeting. Formal tone. Serious voice. We need to talk about your situation, he said. My situation? Interesting. When I walked into that room, it felt different. Heavier. My brother was already there. My aunt, too. Even a lawyer I'd never seen before was sitting quietly in the corner. That's when I knew this was it. Ion, my father began, folding his hands together like he was about to deliver bad news. Your business is in trouble. I almost smiled. Is it? I asked. Yes, he said firmly. We've reviewed your finances. We. Not you. We. With the recent losses, my brother added, you're exposed. If something goes wrong, you could lose everything. Lose everything. That was the goal, wasn't it? We found a solution, my aunt said softly. Of course they had. The lawyer slid a folder across the table. I opened it slowly, and there it was. Contracts, transfer agreements, control clauses, all neatly prepared, all designed to do one thing. Take everything out of my hands. They'll manage your assets temporarily, the lawyer explained, just until things stabilize. Temporarily, I flipped through the pages, every line, every clause, every hidden condition, and I saw it. The real plan, once signed, I wouldn't just lose control. I'd lose ownership, completely. I looked up. They were watching me, waiting, expecting hesitation, resistance, fear. Instead, I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair. Give me a day, I said. My father nodded. Of course, take your time. But I could see it in his eyes. He didn't think I'd refuse. Because in his mind, I never had before. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was stressed, because I was planning. If they wanted me weak, I'd show them weak. If they wanted me desperate, I'd give them desperate. And if they wanted everything, I'd let them take it. On my terms. The next day, I walked back into that room. Same people, same setup, same expectations. I picked up the pen, paused, looked at each of them one last time. My brother, my aunt, my father, and then I signed every page, every clause, Every single thing they thought would destroy me. And as the pen left the paper, my brother smiled. My aunt exhaled in relief. My father finally looked at me, satisfied. They thought it was over. They thought they had won. I just placed the pen down, leaned back, and said quietly, "Done." And in that moment, none of them realized. They had just walked straight into my plan. Because the truth was, I hadn't lost anything. Not yet. But they were about to lose everything. And they had no idea. The first thing I did, after signing everything, was nothing. No dramatic exit. No confrontation. No sudden change in behavior. I just stood up, nodded once, and walked out like a man who had just handed over his life. Because that's exactly what they needed to believe. By the time I got home, my phone was already buzzing. 3 missed calls from my brother. 2 messages from my aunt. "We're here for you. You did the right thing." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then locked it without replying. The acting had already started. Over the next few days, everything changed. Quietly, efficiently, brutally. Access to my company accounts, gone. Decision-making authority, transferred. Even my own office, my office was suddenly under review. They moved fast, faster than people who were just trying to help. And that confirmed it. This wasn't a backup plan. This was the plan. On the 4th day, my brother walked into what used to be my office without knocking. Same confident stride, same energy. Different tone. "Hey," he said casually, like we were equals now. "We need to talk about restructuring." Again. I leaned back in my chair, well, technically not mine anymore, and forced a tired expression. "Yeah, sure," I said quietly. He didn't even notice how easy that was. "We're thinking of letting go of some staff," he continued, flipping through a file. "Cut costs, tighten things up." I felt my jaw tighten. These weren't just employees. They were people who had been with me from the start. People who trusted me, but I didn't react. I couldn't. "Do what you think is best," I said. He paused for a second, studying me. Maybe expecting resistance, maybe hoping for it. But when it didn't come, he smirked. "Good. Glad you're finally being practical." Practical. That's what he called it. By the end of that week, the rumors had started. Ion lost everything. He messed up big. Family had to step in. They controlled the narrative. Of course they did. And I let them, because the more they believed their own version of the story, the easier this was going to be. But behind the scenes, everything was already in motion. The night before I signed those documents, I made 3 calls. Not emotional ones, not desperate ones, calculated. The first was to my lawyer, not the one sitting in that room. My lawyer, the kind of man who didn't talk much, but when he did, things happened. "I need you to review something," I told him. I sent him copies of the documents, every page, every clause. There was a long silence on the other end. Then he said something that confirmed everything. "They're not just taking control," he said. "They're setting up a full transfer." "I know," I replied. Another pause. "Do you want me to stop this?" That was the moment. The easiest way out. One legal move, and their entire plan would collapse before it even started. But I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. "No," I said. "Then what do you want?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "I want them to finish it." The second call was to someone they didn't even know existed. A silent partner. Someone who had been with me since year 3 of the business. No public records, no visible connection. Everything clean. "I'm going to transfer operational control," I told him. He didn't panic, didn't ask unnecessary questions. Just one sentence. "Is this part of something bigger?" "Yes." Another pause. "Then I'm in." The third call was the most important one, and the one that changed everything. Back in the present, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the city lights. From the outside, it looked like I had lost. Actually, no. From the outside, it looked worse than that. It looked like I had failed. And failure makes people comfortable. It makes them careless. And that's exactly what was happening. 2 weeks in, they stopped pretending. No more "we're doing this for you." No more fake sympathy. Now it was just control. My father started making decisions without even informing me. My brother practically moved into the office. My aunt handled financial oversight, which really just meant monitoring everything like a hawk. And me? I was still there, still showing up, still playing the role, the man who lost everything and didn't even fight back. But then something interesting happened. They got greedy. It started small. A transfer here, a withdrawal there, numbers that didn't match, accounts that moved faster than they should. I noticed it immediately. Of course I did. But I didn't say anything, because every time they crossed that line, they were digging themselves deeper. One afternoon, I walked into the office and overheard my brother laughing. Not just laughing, bragging. "Yeah, it's done," he said into his phone. "He signed everything. He doesn't even know what hit him." I stopped just outside the door. "You should have seen his face," he continued. "Completely finished." There was a pause. Then he laughed again. "Yeah, we're in control now. Everything. Everything." I almost walked in. Almost. But instead, I turned around and left, because the more he talked, the better this was going to end. That night, I got a message. Not from family. Not from anyone involved. From my lawyer. "It's ready." Just 2 words. But they hit harder than anything else. Because that meant phase 2 was complete. The next morning, things escalated. My father called another meeting. Same room, same setup, different energy. "We've made some decisions," he said. "Of course you have." "We're restructuring ownership permanently," my aunt added. Permanently. There it was. No more pretending. No more temporary solutions. This was the final grab. "We'll need you to attend a formal announcement," my brother said, leaning back like he already owned the future. "Just to keep things professional." Professional. I nodded slowly. "When?" I asked. "End of the week. Big meeting. Partners, investors, everyone." Everyone. Perfect. I walked out of that room feeling something I hadn't felt since this started. Not anger. Not stress. Anticipation. Because they had just done exactly what I needed them to do. They made it public. They made it official. They made it visible. And once something is visible, it can be destroyed in front of everyone. That evening, I sat down with my lawyer. Face to face this time. He slid a folder across the table. Different from theirs. Heavier. Cleaner. Stronger. "Everything is in place," he said. I opened it slowly, and as I flipped through the pages, I felt it. That quiet certainty. The kind that doesn't need emotion. Just timing. "They won't see this coming," he added. I looked up at him. "No," I said calmly. "They won't." 2 days later, the invitations went out. Formal. Polished. Important. A company-wide announcement. New leadership. New direction. A fresh start. And right at the center of it was me. The man who lost everything. The night before the event, I stood in front of the mirror. Same face. Same person. But everything else? Different. Because tomorrow, they weren't just going to celebrate my downfall. They were going to witness theirs. And the worst part? They were the ones who invited everyone to watch. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. A message from my brother. "Don't be late. This is important." I stared at it for a second, then smiled for the first time in weeks. Because for him, this was the moment he won. For me, this was the moment everything ended. I picked up my jacket, grabbed the folder, and walked out the door. And as I stepped into that building, I could already hear the voices. The crowd, the energy, everyone waiting, everyone watching, everyone about to see the truth. I adjusted my sleeves, took a slow breath, and walked toward the room where they thought they'd taken everything from me. They had no idea. They were about to lose it all. The room went quiet when I walked in. Not completely silent, but enough. Enough for people to notice. Enough for heads to turn. Because to everyone there, I wasn't supposed to look like this. I wasn't supposed to walk in calm. I wasn't supposed to look composed. I definitely wasn't supposed to look in control. But I did, and that was the first crack. The room was packed. Investors, senior staff, a few industry faces I recognized, Even some people who had ignored me for months suddenly showed up, probably expecting a spectacle. They thought they were about to witness a collapse. Instead, they were about to witness something else entirely. At the front of the room, my father stood near the podium, talking to a few people like he already owned the place. My brother was beside him, relaxed, confident, smiling like this was his moment. And my aunt? She was scanning the room, making sure everything looked perfect. They had planned this carefully. Public announcement. Full control. No turning back. Or at least, that's what they thought. My brother noticed me first. His smile widened. "There he is," he said loudly, stepping toward me. "Right on time." I nodded. Wouldn't miss it. There was something in my tone. Subtle, but just enough. He paused for a split second, then brushed it off. Because why wouldn't he? In his mind, I had already lost. "Ready?" he asked. I looked past him, at the crowd, at the stage, at the screen behind the podium. Everything was set. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm ready." A few minutes later, everyone was seated. The lights dimmed slightly, and my father stepped up to the microphone. He cleared his throat, adjusted his jacket, and smiled. That same smile, the one he had when I signed everything. "Thank you all for being here," he began. Smooth, confident. "We've gone through a period of challenges." A few nods in the audience. Difficult decisions had to be made. And as a family, we stepped in to stabilize the situation. Stabilize. I almost laughed. "As of this week," he continued, "we have taken full operational control of the company." There it was. Out in the open. No hesitation. No hiding. And we're excited to announce a new direction moving forward. Applause. Soft at first, then building. Because from the outside, this looked like leadership, like recovery, like success. My brother stepped forward next. More energy, more confidence. "We've already implemented major changes," he said, "cutting unnecessary costs, restructuring departments." Unnecessary. That's what he called people's livelihoods. And positioning the company for long-term growth. More applause. I stood there quietly, watching it all, letting it build, letting them feel it. Because the higher they climbed in that moment, the harder they were about to fall. And of course, my brother added, glancing at me with a faint smirk, none of this would have been possible without Ayan's cooperation during this transition. There was a shift in the room. People looked at me, some curious, some sympathetic, some just waiting. "Why don't you come up here?" he said. There it was. The invitation. The moment they thought would complete the story. The defeated man standing beside the people who replaced him. I nodded and walked toward the stage. Slow, controlled, every step deliberate. As I reached the podium, my father handed me the microphone. "Say a few words," he said quietly. Not a request. A performance. They wanted closure. They wanted me to confirm their version of events. I took the mic, looked out at the crowd, and for a second, I said nothing. Just silence. Then I spoke. "Yeah, I'll say a few words." My voice was calm, steady, not broken, not emotional. And that was the second crack. "I think everything that needed to be said has already been said," I continued. A few people shifted in their seats. Something felt off. They could feel it, even if they didn't know why. "My family stepped in," I said slowly, "took control, made decisions." I paused. Let that sit. And they're right. That line relaxed the room, just a little, because it sounded like acceptance, like surrender. But then, I smiled, just slightly. The only problem is, I turned my head, looking directly at my brother. They missed something. Silence. Heavy. Immediate. My brother frowned. "What are you talking about?" he asked, forcing a laugh. I didn't answer him. Instead, I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folder. Same motion. Same kind of folder. Different outcome. "I signed everything," I said, holding it up. Every document. Every clause. My father stepped closer. "Ayan," he started. I raised a hand. Not aggressively. Just enough to stop him. But what you didn't realize, I continued, turning back to the audience, is that those documents only work if certain conditions stay true. Now people were paying attention, really paying attention. And those conditions, I opened the folder, stopped being true before I even signed. My brother's smile was gone. "What did you do?" he asked. This time, there was no confidence in his voice. I looked at him, then at my father, then at my aunt, and for the first time, I didn't hide it. I moved everything. The room went still. "Before you ever brought those papers to me," I continued, flipping through the pages, "I transferred operational ownership to a third party." Confusion spread across their faces. Not denial, not anger. Confusion. "What third party?" my aunt snapped. I looked at her, then gestured toward the entrance. Right on cue, the doors opened, and he walked in. Calm, composed, the man they had never accounted for. My silent partner. "You never owned the company," I said quietly. "You never controlled anything." The room exploded into whispers. People turning, talking, processing. "That's not possible," my father said, stepping forward. "We have signed documents. Documents based on assets I no longer held." I cut in. That hit hard. "You transferred control of nothing," I added. "And in doing that," I paused, letting it land. "You exposed everything." My lawyer stepped forward next. Another face they didn't expect. "Funds were redirected," he said clearly. "Illegally. We have full records." He handed copies to several people in the front row. "Unauthorized withdrawals," he continued. "Fraudulent transfers. Misuse of corporate authority." Each word, a nail. "This doesn't make sense," my brother said, shaking his head. We were in control." "No," I said calmly. "You thought you were." The screen behind us flickered, then changed. Emails, transaction logs, recordings, everything, including his voice. You should have seen his face, completely finished. The same call, the same words, now amplified. Public, unavoidable.
The room shifted instantly, from curiosity to judgment. My brother went pale. My aunt stepped back. My father said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. "And since you made this public," I added, lowering the mic slightly, "I figure I should too." Security stepped in, not aggressively, just present, and behind them, 2 more people. Legal, the kind you don't argue with. "This meeting is now under formal review," one of them announced. That was it. No shouting, no chaos, just quiet destruction, the kind that doesn't need noise. I stepped back from the microphone, looked at all 3 of them one last time, and said, "You wanted everything." I paused, just for a second. "You should have been more careful what you asked for." Then I walked off the stage. No rush, no hesitation, just silence behind me, and everything collapsing where I used to stand. By the time I reached the exit, I could already hear it. Voices rising, questions, panic, but I didn't turn around, because I didn't need to. It was already over. And for the first time since it started, everything was exactly where it should be. Not in their hands. In mine,